Irreverent, entertaining, cool. You're listening to LA Talk Radio.
You're listening to the Concierge Coaches Show with Bruce Cameron and Justin Nimmergood, only on LA Talk Radio.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Concierge Coaches Show here on LA Talk Radio. I'm Bruce Cameron, and Justin is out today at a training in the Los Angeles area. And he'll be back next week to tell us all about his adventures and what all and who all he got to meet and do in his field. So we're excited to hear from him next week. This week, however, we have a return of an exciting guest that we've had on the show with us before. This gentleman, former executive with the Federal Bureau of Prisons and now part of the nation's probably best prison consulting firm, Federal Prison Authority. We have with us today Mr. Jose Santana. Welcome back.
Thank you, Bruce, for having me. It's a pleasure to be back.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Always a pleasure. And, since you've last come on, and of course, I'm part of Federal Prison Authority myself. I'm not going to lie, I'm very interested in that and helped find Federal Prison Authority. So what's happened since December, President Trump signed into law something called the First Step Act. And this has everybody very excited, particularly people that are already in federal prison or about to go into federal prison. And just like anything else that's new, when it transitions into a law, it's a process getting that law enacted. And man, I tell you, I know we've been getting phone calls and you've been getting phone calls. We have inmates packing their bags, aren't they?
We've been very busy. When the shutdown was on, we were very busy, Bruce. So a lot of families and friends and attorneys and federal public defenders calling on the First Step Act and its applicability and how it's going to be implemented.
Right. And again, folks, today's January 28th, 2019. The government is temporarily back on from a very long shutdown. And so you can imagine, or we know, but our listeners can imagine how slow government is already, much less grinding back to a start now that the shutdown is over. So this is a very interesting law now, and has a lot of different components. So we might tackle some of those today and talk about those. Now, folks, none of this has actually happened yet. There's going to be, this is going to happen. So, Jose, what's kind of the process? Walk our listeners through a little bit of the process from the CFR and on down to program statements and stuff like that. How will this actually get to reality here?
Well, as you very well said, Bruce, the First Step Act was signed into law by President Trump on December 21st, 2018. So it's already a law. It's enacted. It's in the Code of Federal Regulations and the implementations of it. It's going to be up to the Department of Justice as to the reforms that affect the Department of Justice. There are 4 sentencing reform provisions, along with a number of reforms to how individuals are going to be treated in federal prison. So the law already has the requirements. DOJ has to establish their public policies on how it's going to be implemented by the Bureau of Prisons. So it'll probably be late summer, early fall, and who knows, next winter that this provisions are going to be into current active policy with the Bureau of Prisons.
Yeah, so it's going to take some time, folks. And I know if we have listeners that have loved ones and family in federal prison already, or we have some clients out there listening that may be headed toward federal prison, just kind of cool your jets a little bit, because it is going to be a little while before this gets enacted. I think there are several elements to this, though. But it is going to happen. That is the good news, right?
And go ahead. Bruce, the sentencing and the compassionate release reforms that are in the law are effective right now.
Okay.
But the other parts of the bill are being phased over 3 years. And we're going to explain briefly about it. So in the next 3 years, the phase of the bill that deals with not the components that are sentencing and compassionate releases, those are going to be phased out in 3 years. sentencing compassionate releases is already the law. It's already active, and some federal judges are sentencing inmates and asking that the bureau implement the procedures of the First Step Act.
Really?
Yes,
Right
sir.
there in the judgment commitment order.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Holy cow. Now I'm asking a question. I don't know the answer to this one, but how is it that the compassionate releases can go in right now, but the other stuff can't?
Because those affect the individuals that are being released here, and are the law is applicable to them now.
Okay.
So that's
I see.
Even now and retroactive.
So there's not a special need, right? Because there is no special needs assessment for a compassionate release case or whatever. It's just there's other criteria: how much time they've done on their sentence, the level of their sickness, and what else?
The First Step Act establishes the elderly offender program, so it has already takes into provision the implementation of the elderly offender program. So it does have some guides as to how it's going to be applicable. They don't have to wait for policy for that.
Okay. So that's good to know. And we do have several. We've worked with several cases where the person had extenuating medical circumstances, and we've given advice and consultation to family members whose loved one was in a federal prison, suffering from a prolonged physical condition, and they were wanting, to see if they were eligible for a compassionate release.
Right. It has strict requirements that needs to be met. If they don't meet one, they're automatically excluded. For example, I had an attorney that just called me before the show, asking me had a client where the lady is in prison, has 4 children, and the caregiver is the oldest of the children. Okay. The oldest of the children is now going to college and is unable to provide care for the children. So they're asking me if the First Step Act brings the elderly release for the elderly. And I said, well, the caregiver has to be a partner or spouse or a significant other that provides the care. And in those cases that they cannot provide the cases, it's 2 strict requirements. First, death of the caregiver or incapacitation, and verified by a doctor that the caregiver is incapacitated. So in this case, the young lady is going to college. So
is she too far out? She's not considered essential staff. Right. She's not.
No, she's not there. So it's strict requirement. Man. It's strict application of the law. So she doesn't qualify.
Right. And even still, let's say, we and the attorney could put a package together. It would go up before the warden. The warden could technically say yes, but that doesn't mean yes because it has to go to Washington, D.C. Is that right?
Absolutely right. The Bureau of Prison has to request to the court that they release this inmate. The warden could send a package up. He could recommend early release for that person, but once it gets up to the court, they're going to deny it.
Right. So it is a multiple step, strict criteria to get into the program for eligibility, and then you have to write it up. Then it has to get approvals on several levels, and look, people do release under compassionate release. Make no mistake about it. It happens. It doesn't happen necessarily every day, but it does happen, and it's a concerted effort. And sometimes myself working at, I guess Butner, Carville, anyway, several medical centers. We have social work and other departments, particularly if even Fort Worth, which is a low, they have a social work capacity there as well, and can assist with the compassionate release documentation as well. So, and that is something that is going to be more utilized, and I think it's going to be in the forefront because we have an elderly population and a sick population, and make no mistake about it, it's very cost prohibitive for the taxpayers. Just working in a women's medical center, the millions and millions of dollars that costs taxpayers. I mean, I just want to make sure that you're using your taxpayers' money correctly. You're being a good steward of the public trust, and some of these offenders may be able to have their healthcare needs taken care of privately or with their own insurance or benefits or what have you. and that would be a relief, I think, for the Bureau of Prisons. Anyway, but so anything else on compassionate release, or
I think we could talk about it in more in depth as we go in the program, Bruce.
you're right, but nothing for today. I think we've got a good handle on it today, for what we know. Yeah, and again, folks, this is brand spanking new stuff. I mean, this is we have an idea of how they're going to implement it, but the timeline and some of the nuances, we just don't know yet. I think another. So let's talk about types of inmates that qualify for some of these services. Okay, I think a lot of the people that are going to receive the most benefit from the First Step Act are nonviolent offenders, and there's going to be a risk assessment, I think, performed on every offender in the Bureau of Prisons to see where they fall in a risk continuum. But make no mistake about it, there are several types of inmates that you and I can sit here today and probably tell our audience they don't got anything coming, right, in terms of a time cut. So Jose, lay out a couple of types of charges or inmates that might be precluded from getting out early.
Well, some of the cases, obviously, violent criminal offenses are not eligible. Sex offenders are not eligible. Unfortunately, illegal non-U.S. citizens, illegal undocumented individuals, non-U.S. citizens, obviously, are some of the ones that come up to my mind real quick, Bruce. There are also a lot of terms that are interchangeable between this law, like good time credit versus earned time credit. Good time credit for U.S. citizens, good time credit for non-U.S. citizens. That's applicable to everybody. It doesn't matter who they are. The good time credit rule applies to everybody.
So let's park the bus right there for a second on the good conduct time. That's great. There's one of the first things that I probably see happening once this moves forward is they're going to make that change from 47 to the full 54 days a year good conduct time, right?
Yes, and that's one of the things that during my tenure as the chief of the Bureau's Designation Computation Center, we were appalled on the things that we could implement to grant some benefits or relief to inmates. And that was my first thing that I mentioned. Currently, the law says it was 54 days, but actual applicability of that law was 47 days. So inmates earn 47 days per year and a day based on the mathematical interpretation of that law. But we wanted to give them the extra 7 days, and Congress, during the old administration, the Smart on Credit initiative, as some of you might remember, we gave some suggestions, and they consider it, and now it's the law. So that's one of the things that I leave to legacy for the Bureau of Prisons.
Oh, man. That's right. It's one of the
So everybody across the board will get the 54 days good conduct time credit. And I was informed by some of the folks that this is going to be implemented here soon. The government shutdown actually affected the implementation of this because they need to reprogram the computer bases to grant the full 54 days per year and a day of accomplishment. And this is going to be retroactive. It should be coming out as soon as they revamp the formulas for the computers, and everybody will get that benefit. But it's slow in coming into effect.
Right. But let's be sure on moving from 47 to 54 days a year, good conduct time is going to be available to every inmate, violent, non-violent, sex offender, gun case, you name it, right? Everybody, alien or what do you say, undocumented individual?
Right. Undocumented individuals that are non-U.S. citizens.
Non-U.S. citizens, yeah.